There we go. People are pouring in, Mimi. Good crowd tonight. All right. It is 7 o'clock and I will continue admitting people. Welcome everybody to First Sundays offered by Kol Nashim in the Colorado Hebrew Chorale, although we are on a second Sunday because we figured nobody would come if we did this January 1st. And so happy to see so many of you here. Mimi is going to offer a fascinating program, I'm sure, on Fanny Brice, as we were just saying, without whom Barbra Streisand's career would not have been the same. So I am Leah Peer, music director of Kol Nashim, the women's choir of the Colorado Hebrew Chorale. We thank you for joining us. And I will do a short commercial at the end. So right now, Mimi, take it away and I'll keep letting people come in.
All right. Well, I've got some music to share that can keep going while people keep coming in.
Here I am, there you'll be, miles and miles away from me. I can't see the goodbye. Still, best of friends have to part. Don't lose sleep and don't lose heart. You know me, so baby don't cry. I'd rather be blue thinking of you. I'd rather be blue over you than be happy with somebody else. I can't do without you, for you I'm strong, I'm crazy about you, about you. Don't stay too long. I need a little little and I'm knocking on wood. Honey, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. It's so hard to be good. I'd rather be blue thinking of you. I'd rather be blue over you than be happy with somebody else. Will I be good? Will I be bad? Don't be a fool, you fool. My little flat, I'm turning that into a Sunday school. While you're away, I'm here to say there'll be no Iceman there. Singing the blues, I'm gonna use nothing but rigid air. Still, I'd rather be blue, thinking of you. I'd rather be blue over you than be happy with somebody else.
So that was the song I'd Rather Be Blue Over You. Lyrics were by Billy Rose, music by Fred Fisher from 1929. And indeed, that was Fanny Brice singing. And you will be hearing a lot more about the lyricist a little bit later, actually. But yes, and I believe that song actually made its way into the Funny Girl film as well, which is going to be talked about quite a bit over this session and the next one for some very obvious reasons. Oh, you need a Jewish girl for this. That is a quote from Carol Burnett to Jerome Robbins when talking about casting Fanny Brice, to kind of give you an idea how important being Jewish was to her and her character, who she was as a person and how she portrayed herself on stage. Many people were approached before they got to Barbra Streisand, and I think that this quote is very telling. So here we go. So, she was born Fanny Bora on October 29th, 1891. She was the third child of Rose and Charles Bora, and they were Jewish immigrants who lived on the Lower East Side Rose came from a small village outside of Budapest, and Charles came from Alsace. The Boras purchased a saloon, and it was managed by Brice's mother, Rose. However, they had some issues with their father gambling away most of the money, and at one point, Rose eventually grew tired of it and left him in 1902 so that she could put more money into the family instead of it being gambled away. Brice had 3 other siblings. There was Phil, Caroline, who was called Carrie, and Louis, who was called Lou. So they moved in 1895 from the Lower East Side to Newark, New Jersey because of the congestion and the crime in the city. And around that time is actually when she started making her first appearances while she was very young. First was a burlesque review. It was titled The Girls from Happy Land, starring Billy Watson. So if you're thinking gypsy and you're thinking burlesque was a completely different art form back then. It was a lot more commentary and skits and things like that than the striptease. So Brice explained in a 1946 interview, she changed her name from Bora to Brice because she was tired of being called Borax, Borake, a whole bunch of other different versions of her name that were simply not correct. She chose Brice not just because it sounds similar, but actually it was the surname of a family friend of hers. And so then she started making her appearances as Fanny Brice and never went back. Too fast. All right. So she actually, one of her earliest things that she did in the burlesque scene was a song called Sadie Salome Go Home, which was, as she called, a Jewish comedy song, and was written by none other than Irving Berlin. The song was a spoof on Salome's Dance of the Seven Veils, and it was actually marked the first time that she performed with her notable Yiddish accent that she took with her kind of wherever she went after. Ethnic comedy, as it would be called, was very, very popular at the time. This is like the height of like minstrelsy, Al Jolson, and the likes like that. So something like this was not too uncommon, even if it would be nearly unthinkable today. So, alrighty. First bit of trivia for the night. What year did Fanny join the Ziegfeld Follies? Is launched, so your options are 1909, 1912, 1915, or 1910.
And Mimi, while people are answering the poll, there's a question in the chat asking where her parents immigrated from.
Oh, I thought I said
I
that.
thought you mentioned that, but maybe I didn't. Maybe I didn't see the question until after you answered it.
Well, I'll cover my bases again. So her mother came from a village outside of Budapest, and her father came from Alsace, which I'm probably mispronouncing because I don't speak French.
Alsace-Lorraine.
Okay. All right. Any other? We've got about half of people participating in the poll. Anybody else?
People don't like dates, Mimi.
No.
Unless they're the romantic kind.
I promise there's no more dates in the other questions. Okay, we got a few more. All right. Well, guess we'll call it here. Got a pretty even spread. So it seems that most people guessed that she joined the Ziegfeld Follies in 1912, which is a significant year, but not for Fanny. She joined the Follies in 1910.
The happiness and harmony that marriage truly promises.
Do we know, was that something that Fanny actually did?
I haven't found anything that confirmed like if any of the acts that are actually depicted in Funny Girl are. But it kind of goes in line with actually what I was just about to say, is that so she actually received a personal telegram from Ziegfeld about joining the Follies that said, and I quote, "Will you come to see me at your earliest convenience? Stop, Florenz Ziegfeld," which is pretty awesome. Considering he was quite the theatrical impresario at the time.
Yeah.
So she wasn't exactly considered unattractive, but she wasn't conventionally attractive, especially compared to what was called like Ziegfeld's long-stemmed American beauties, the epitome of the American girl. That's tends to be what he liked to showcase on stage, with like the fancy gowns and the big hats and the special walk because otherwise they fall over and all of that. So to Ziegfeld, if she couldn't be the prettiest woman on stage, then she'd be the funniest. All right, so her next role was as and so actually her first run in the Follies did not go so well. She did have a 2-year contract from about 1910 to 1911. And because of poor writing that was done for her, she wasn't exactly well received. While the people did consider her funny, it was not a resounding success as is usually depicted in these cases. So she went and did other things after her contract was not renewed, which includes this Max Spiegel's The College Girls, where she played the role Josie McFadden. Oh wait, sorry, getting that backwards. So after she was originally let go from the Follies the first time around, that's when she met up with Blanche Merrill, who was a songwriter at the time, in 1915, and the two began collaborating. And you'll actually know that Blanche Merrill wrote a lot of the songs that Fanny became most well known for. And in this time, she flip-flopped between a bunch of different contracts, including Ziegfeld's rival, the Schuberts. That's how she actually got a lot more widespread fame in booking all sorts of different acts outside of New York and kind of all over the place. This included 3 that took place in London, 7 musical reviews, and vaudeville bookings in over 3 different cities. She was very much a busy lady. And I think that the reason she and Merrill hit it off quite well was that, it's kind of funny to say it this way, but that seems kind of funny to think about it now, but Merrill specialized in writing for women. And so she wrote songs like Becky's Back in the Ballet and The Yiddish Bride, among others. It was actually around this time in, I believe, 1912 when she met, I guess you could say, the infamous Nicky Arnstein, but we'll talk more about him later. She came back to the Follies in 1916, and that's when she started to really hit her stride and kind of find that balance of who she was as a performer and what she wanted to put out into the world. And at this time also, so you may not know this, she actually married at this time as well. So Nick Arnstein, despite what the musical tells you, was not her first husband. It was the barber Frank White, who she kind of married on a whim in 1910. They never lived together or anything like that, and she divorced him in 1913. So some of you might know this. What was Fanny Brice's signature song? Options are Secondhand Rose, I'm the Greatest Star, My Man, or Sadie, Sadie. All right. This should be easier than a date, I hope. Getting quite a few. About, oh, more than half. All right. Okay, people feeling a bit more confident about this one. I kind of figured. Anybody else? 72% is not bad. Okay. Last calls. Last calls for anyone willing to participate in trivia. All right. So the general consensus was that her signature song was Second Hand Rose. It's actually My Man.
Fanny Brice sings My Man.
Cost me a lot, but there's one thing that I've got. It's my man. Cold and wet, tired you bet, but all that I soon forget with my man.
And this actually was, at least it's purported to be actually written about Nick Arnstein and their rather tumultuous relationship. And is a very, it's, if you know Fanny Brice's, the rest of her work as a comedian, it's very much contrasting, especially the way it was performed with her leaning up against a streetlight dressed up very simply, as opposed to the big facial expressions, the wide rolling eyes, the hand gestures. It's very, very contrasting. But people still loved it, even if like the Follies, the audiences were not exactly sure what to make of it. There was no denying that she had talent. So her personal life. So she first met Julius Nicky Arnstein in 1912 after one of her performances in Baltimore. He was a professional professional gambler and a con man, which is definitely depicted. And according to Brice, she fell in love with him after she saw his 7 toothbrushes and monogrammed silk pajamas. Arnstein was not exactly a successful man. That is also very much depicted in the musical as well. He seemed to fail at everything he attempted to do, including wiretapping, definitely not in the way that we know it, which sent him to Sing Sing prison in 1915 for a year. And during that entire year, Fanny visited him on a weekly basis and would bring him a hot meal. She was very much in love with him, even though, as mentioned, when they first met, she was married, and so was he to his wife, Carrie Greenthal. But by 1918, he had officially divorced his wife, and she had been single for a time, and they married shortly thereafter and had 2 children, Francis and William.
Was Arnstein Jewish?
No. I had to double check on that one, but no. So it wasn't really a happy marriage. She was very, very much devoted to him and stood by his side time and time again, no matter how, like, even though he was cheating on her on a very frequent basis and it was becoming more flagrant year after year. And so she did eventually divorce him in 1927 upon his release from Leavenworth, which had been for an indifferent incident. He was accused of orchestrating Wall Street bond robbery, and there's a lot of money involved. But really, the divorce was about the infidelity. And she was the one who initiated it, as opposed to the other way around. Right. And according to Brice, she was surprised when he really did nothing to stop her from going forward with the proceedings, that he did nothing when the marriage dissolved and when she actually filed for full custody as well. He just left, and basically he remained out of her life after that point and out of the children's lives as well.
Take more explanation than this. You are woman, I am man. Let's kiss.
And that is Ramin Karimloo. He is currently playing the role of Nick Arnstein in the Broadway revival. And if you've heard his name before, it's likely because you've seen him playing the Phantom of the Opera or Jean Valjean. So what character is Fanny Brice notable for playing? Herself, Baby Snooks, Charlie McCarthy, or Margaret Houlihan? Sometimes I don't always make these hard. All right. That's about where we tailed off the last one. Most of everybody guessed was Baby Snooks. You would be correct. And while this was mostly a radio role, basically strictly a radio role, to be honest, she would dress up every time that she was performing the role. It helped her, I guess, get into character and the like. And it's not all that different from the previously mentioned Charlie McCarthy, who was, of course, with Edgar Bergen, who would always have a puppet so that even the radio audiences could see him. Here actually is a clip from, I believe it's Ziegfeld's 1946 Follies, which was filmed as like a posthumous tribute to Ziegfeld.
Turn on the radio, and we'll dance, and we'll have a good time. Can you do the jitterbug?
Well, I'll take a chance.
Oh, Spanish, Senor Martin. You know, my grandfather was a Spaniard.
See? So that's what you're up to, huh? The old badger game. Well, you'll not get away with it. I'll have you both arrested.
Oh, please don't do that, Mr. Martin. I might as well tell you the truth. That ticket you got won the sweepstakes, and they're offering $25,000 for it.
You mean this ticket won?
It won! You're right, Monty. Honesty is the best policy.
There actually is not a lot of film of Fanny because she didn't do a lot of films. She didn't really like it as a media. She did pursue it, but she didn't feel that she suited it as well. And audiences also didn't quite connect with her in the same way that she did on stage.
Mimi, there's a question whether the actor was William Frawley,
Yes, it was William Frawley from I Love Lucy and Benny.
better known as Fred.
Yes.
But you can see the faces. I mean, Streisand obviously watched whatever there was of her, because you can definitely see where Funny Girl, some of the mugging from Funny Girl came from.
Oh, 100%. So she did actually continue to return to the Follies throughout her tumultuous marriage in 1920, 1921, and 23. But she was also determined to be a serious actress. So more than just the funny and the comedy, and she wanted to actually be taken seriously, which is kind of where My Man fits into the picture of it being a bit more serious than her other work. But the few attempts that she did try at being a bit more dramatic usually flopped for some reason or another, or just were not received well, whether it be poor writing or production or what have you. In 1921, with the Follies, Brice premiered another famous song, Secondhand Rose, another one that's probably been heard a time or two. And as mentioned, she did turn attention to film, but also with the struggles of the mugging and things like that, that wasn't quite the same as it was on Hollywood. She struggled with those same beauty standards that she'd been fighting with the entire time. She actually did star in a film called My Man, which featured the aforementioned song, but the general American audience did not receive her very well overall. So it is notable to actually note that she was the first female star of a talking picture, trying to follow up with the success of Al Jolson's The Jazz Singer, which of course is noted for being the first talking picture, but it just was not the same. And I think in total she made 6 films. A lot of them are actually available to be seen on YouTube, including My Man. So if anybody is curious to check them out and see what they're like, you can watch them there. So she was faced with yet another failure of a show called Fioretta in 1929, but it introduced her to Billy Rose, the man who would become her 3rd husband. So they married on February 8th, 1929 in a civil ceremony. And according to Brice, I was never bored with Billy. So their marriage also was not long lasting as well. It was about 10 years. Right. So they did like working together. They had similar approaches to show business, and that's how they worked well together. He actually created a couple of musical reviews to specifically showcase Fanny's talents. This included Sweet and Low in 1930 and The Crazy Quilt in 1931. This is also around the same time that she started creating a whole host of, like a gallery of characters, not unlike Batman, if you really think about it, of the whole villains gallery. But she had a wide variety, including the Countess Dubinsky and Modernistic Mo, to name a few, and they were all like very different from each other, but I believe Baby Snooks was one of the more popular ones. And at this time, it was told she had never been funnier, and she stood out like a bagel on a loaf of white bread. That's what Rose had to say about her. Sounds like a very familiar line. So she actually got a weekly radio show, and that was where Baby Snooks kind of took over full time. After that point, she never played any other characters on air.
Years, Daddy, played by Hanley Stafford, has been interested in chemistry. In fact, he has a small laboratory set up in the basement, and you can find him there most any evening, tinkering among his test tubes. Tonight, Daddy is at his little bench experimenting. Listen.
Mm-hmm. Well, there it is. Yes, sir, there it is. I have to say it, I'm really proud of myself.
How, Daddy?
Oh, hello, Snooks. Have a look at this.
I'm looking, Daddy.
You know how I did it?
No.
You see that little tank? That contains hydrogen.
Yeah.
The other tank contains oxygen. They're both gases.
Uh-huh.
I took 1,240 parts of the hydrogen and 620 parts of the oxygen and mixed them in a cylinder.
Yeah.
Then I wrapped it in a towel and touched it off with a match.
Yeah.
It exploded 22 times, and there's the result. Look at it.
What is it?
A glass of water.
Are you thirsty?
No, I made it myself.
Oh.
It took me 3 hours to make that glass of water.
Why didn't you get it from the sink?
Oh, anybody can get water from the sink. The trick is to make it yourself.
Why?
Why? What would this world be today if everybody was satisfied to get water from the sink?
I don't know.
What would we do if it weren't for great chemists and physicists like Paracelsus, Archimedes, Newton, and Millikan? What would we be doing?
Getting water from the sink?
No.
So while she was on Baby Snooks, was doing her Baby Snooks show. She had quite a number of co-stars, including Arlene Harris as her mother, Danny Thomas as Jerry, and Charlie Cantor. And Charlie Cantor as Uncle Louie. So Brice was very much devoted to the character of Baby Snooks. Snooks is just the kid I used to be. She's my kind of youngster, the type I like. She has imagination. She's eager. She's alive. With all her deviltry, she is still a good kid, never vicious or mean. I love Snooks, and when I play her, I do it as seriously as if she were real. I am Snooks. For 20 minutes or so, Fanny Brice ceases to exist. So Brice appeared on Tallulah Bankhead's The Big Show with which fellow Jewish comedian? Groucho Marx, Jack Benny, Lenny Bruce, or Shemp Howard. Right. Okay, about halfway, almost there. So there seems to be a bit of a split on some of these answers. Right. Most people guessed Jack Benny. It's actually Groucho Marx.
One morning, I shot an elephant in my pajamas. How he got in my pajamas, I don't know. Then we try to remove the tusks. The tusks. That's not so easy to say, tusks. You try that sometime. Tusks.
Oh, simple. Tusks.
Pardon me, my name is Spaulding. I've always wanted to meet you, Mr. Chandler. As I say, we try to remove the tusks, but they were embedded in so firmly that we couldn't budge them. Of course, in Alabama, the Tuscaloosa. But that's entirely irrelevant to what I was talking about.
So Brice played the role of Snooks all the way up until her death in 1951. She had actually suffered a heart attack in 1945, but had returned to radio in the fall of that year. She was notable for really not taking any breaks, even after her children were born. She worked all the way up until she was 7 months pregnant, and then would come back very shortly after, right back to rehearsals. She only brought the character of Snooks to television once in June of 1950. But she realized that at that point it really did not suit that medium for them to see a woman like pushing 60 dressed as a toddler like the way she was. She didn't feel that it played the same way as it did over the radio.
Although Lily Tomlin made a whole bit of that on TV as a grown woman, as a toddler.
Mm-hmm. So as mentioned, she did return to television once more on Tallulah Bankhead's The Big Show in November of 1950. And ironically, she had been considering retirement when she had a stroke on May 24th and died a few days later. This is what she has to say about her career. If you have a career, then a career is your life. The hell with anything else. It is the biggest part of you, and you can be married, have children, have a husband, but it isn't enough for you because a career is always there in your mind, taking the best out of you, which you should have given to your husband and your kids. So there's no denying that she really did love her work. I made the most of most things happen for me, and if they were good, I worked to get them. If they were bad, I worked just as hard for that. But I am not sorry. I will tell anybody that, and it is the truth. I lived the way I wanted to live, and I never did what people said I should do or advised me to do. I'm sure that most people know this one. What musical is a fictionalized depiction of Fanny's life? No No Nanette, Funny Lady, Ragtime, or Funny Girl? Yeah, I didn't think this would be a hard one. All right. Not surprising, everybody guessed Funny Girl.
I'm gonna live and live now. That's what I want. I know how. One more for the whole shebang. One throw that bell will go clang. I on the target and blam. One shot, one gunshot and bam. And Mr.
So for those of you who don't know, that is Julie Benko, who is the alternate Fanny in the current Broadway production. She is absolutely incredible. And I actually saw her in 2013 in the tour of Les Miserables when she was Cosette. Can also confirm she's Jewish. We had a great conversation about how the fact that she went on Birthright.
Did she take over for Leah from Leah Michelle?
She's her alternate, but there's just like a lot of footage of her because everybody can't stop talking about how amazing she is. So this is actually Julie Benko talking about the role. So to kind of put an idea of how big of a legacy, which I will talk about more in just a second. Obviously Funny Girl was a big success, but you would think with a show like that, as popular as it is, it would be performed more. If you did not know this, this revival is the first time it has ever been revived, partly due to the fact that Barbra Streisand left behind some very, very big shoes to fill. And so it's interesting to see how other actresses approach the role as well.
Fanny Brice has obviously been a role that I think many people have been kind of afraid to touch on Broadway for almost 60 years. What's your take on that and sort of the Barbra Streisand legacy of it all? Where's your head at about it, and why do you think it's a good role for you?
Well, Barbra Streisand obviously is iconic in the part, and she is entwined with the role in a lot of ways. But actually, I never saw Funny Girl growing up. I didn't know it. I didn't know the music. I've seen the movie one time. I saw it after I found out I got a call back, and so I was like, I should watch this movie. And it was great, but I actually don't want to keep watching it. I think it was actually very freeing because I was able to approach it from, myself as an actress, and I did a lot of research on the real Fanny Brice, and she was such a fascinating woman. And I think I'm a Jewish woman. She was a Jewish woman. I like being funny. There was like a lot that I could invest in, and I really loved the research. So I actually think it was quite freeing that I didn't know the Barbra version. So I think that's been probably the best way to think about it. And I'll watch it again, all the Barbra version, when this is all, so it doesn't get, because she was amazing, obviously.
And there's more where that.
So Fanny did, of course, leave behind a very, very amazing legacy, including her own star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Notably is the subject of the 1964 musical Funny Girl. SUNY at Stony Brook had a Fanny Brice Theater. Unfortunately, it was raised in 2007 to make room for some dorms. However, there is another Fanny Brice Theater at the University of Southern California, their Cinematic Arts Complex. In 1991, she was featured on a postage stamp, which is shown here, with art by none other than Al Hirschfeld. And in 2006, she was actually featured in a film by the Jewish Women's Archive titled Making Trouble, 3 Generations of Funny Jewish Women. And I think it's pretty safe to say that a lot of her style and things like that have kind of continued their way in comedy as well, and goes far, far beyond Funny Girl. So, as mentioned, next session will be Barbra Streisand. So sorry if anybody was expecting that tonight.
We had a little bit of a miscommunication.
And I think this is definitely a good setup for that, because as Leah mentioned, I don't think that her career would have gone the direction it did if it hadn't been for Funny Girl. Like, she was on a pretty good rise, but that, I think, sealed the deal. Right.
Hang on, I will figure out how to unspotlight you. There we go. That was a wonderful presentation, Mimi, and thank you all for hanging around. If anybody's got something that they'd like to add to the conversation, feel free to raise your physical or digital hand at this point to chime in. We saw some people had some comments in the chat, which was wonderful to see Fred Mertz doing something else.
Which is funny because actually the role isn't that different. Because I watched that full clip and trying to find just the right part to put in. And he, once again, he's a landlord and kind of like a curmudgeon, and I don't know, maybe he's kind of a one-note guy.
Well, I guess that's the kind of look he had.
I guess so.
I guess so. Yeah. So we will update the list on the website, and we will do Funny Girl when Mimi comes back in March. However, next month for First Sundays is Raisins and Almonds, our signature event. We're all working very, very hard. We are honoring Daphne Michelson-Genet, who is a state representative from the 30th District, who is very instrumental and important in many, many laws that were passed in Colorado, not least of which making sure that there is mental health assistance for youth, and helping Colorado pass the Holocaust education in public schools. So we are honoring her because, incidentally, and in addition to her achievements and their intersection with our own mission of Jewish values and culture, she is a former singer of the Colorado Hebrew Chorale. And if you want to hear her sing with us, then February 5th is an opportunity to do that. We are live streaming both the event and the sing-along, the Shira B'Tzibur Israeli style sing-along that's afterwards. So please go to our website, www.coloradohebrewchorale.org, and buy your ticket or make a donation, or buy your ticket and make a donation. And if you'd like to put an ad in our program book in honor of Daphne, there's links and information on how to do that. And if for some reason you have trouble finding them, you can find contact information for Carol Kozak-Ward and myself, Leah Peer. We thank you all for attending. We thank SCFD, the Scientific, Cultural, and Facilities District, who supports our organization, Colorado Creative Industries, and our growing list of sponsors who are buying sponsorships to our event. We're grateful to you all. So, Mimi, unless you have something else that you want to add, or anybody else has something to add, this was an amazing look at a fascinating woman. And I think if you start looking at Jewish comedians today, you're going to see echoes of Fanny Brice everywhere. Thank you, everybody. Laila Tov, wonderful job.
Laila Tov.